So I'm a physical therapist. So I studied in Belgium 5 years. It's a master thesis in Belgium. And then after that, I started working and I met an osteopath. He's called Vincent Feuillin. And he told me, you're a young physical therapist. If there is one training you should do, that's La Méthode Busquet. So I said, oh, but what's that about? And he said he was an osteopath, and I was at that time thinking I would like to study osteopathy, and he advised me instead to study the Méthode Busquet because it's a very global approach. It's an approach that has been created for physical therapists, but also chiropractors and also osteopaths, because it provides a tool to really have a holistic approach of the body, and it gives lots of tools to work on many different pathologies. So that's why I had a look at that training, and I thought that sounded like a good idea, and I studied that for 2 years when I was working. So today I'm going to explain you a bit about this method, because it's a French method, and you know French people are not so good with English. So that's something you probably have never heard about because it's still not translated to English, and you don't have trainings in the UK or in the States. So that's why I think I want to introduce you to this. And also, I think being on the cruise is a good moment for you to think about your health. Because you have lots of time here. Every time we're at sea, you don't necessarily have so many things to do. And also because you're going to very interesting places. And maybe sometimes, if you have some chronic pain, that can reduce a little bit the benefits you would have from the cruise. So that I thought that could be interesting when you're on a cruise like that, to take a look at your health, and maybe if we could manage to reduce the pain or help to walk better, that's something that could be great, and something that you could bring back home, feel a bit better in your body. So that's why I'm here, to try to help people who have issues to feel better in the body and enjoy completely this cruise. So this is what we're gonna talk about today. So I'm going to just explain briefly the origins of the method, and then I will explain you what are the physiological chains. That's a concept very important in the Busquet method. And then we will call about the connective tissue, the fascia. And I know I recognize some faces I have seen at my fascia gym. So you probably have heard this fascia before, but maybe you don't know exactly what it is. So today I will just introduce briefly this concept, because next week I will give a full lecture just about the fascia. And then I will explain you about the container-content relationship. So that's something that is super important in the Busquet method, and you will understand why. After that, I will explain you how does it happen in practice, how is it in my treatment room. And I will also explain you the interest of this method for, by example, back pain or osteoarthritis. It's just 2 examples I picked up to explain you. So let's go through the origins of this method. Léopold Busquet, you can see here on the picture with his wife, Michelle. He was a physical therapist first. So he started working as a physical therapist in 1968. And after his studies, he just thought that he didn't have enough tools to really help the people. He had this feeling that physical therapy was a bit too analytical, like taking each part separately without having a global approach. So he felt that he needed to learn something more to be efficient in his work. So that's why he studied osteopathy. And then after that, he became a director in the College of Osteopathy. So he kept on learning many different methods in his life, different approaches, to try to connect the different systems. With the physical therapy, he had more an approach muscle-wise, I will say, more on the muscle systems. And with the osteopathy, he had more an approach on the joints, on the bones and all of this. So He tried to find connections in between different things, not only the bones, also the muscle, but also the organs inside the abdomen, to try to understand how things connect and how they interact one with the other to create pain, lack of mobility, and things like that. So that's the way he evolved in his life and started to think about his method, mixing lots of different things, and specifically trying to understand how the body is functioning and how the dysfunction are happening. So there is one quote that has been very important in his life, and it's a French osteopath, Mr. Patrick Tepe, who said that. He said in French, on a la statique qu'on peut et pas la statique qu'on veut. And that means in English that we have the static posture that we can and not the static posture that we want. And that is interesting, because when you see someone, especially when you see a young teenager being like that, you're going to say, come on, stay straight, be straight. And actually, sometimes, if we are in a bad posture, it is for a good reason. It's just not so easy to be straight. It's because of tensions that we have. If you ask this man to be straight, I can tell you he's not going to manage to be straight, because he has the static posture that he can and not the one that he wants. So from that, he thought, but then why? The body is smart. Why does it happen that at some point we get a bad posture and pain? So that's exactly the quote that made him start to think and dig a little bit more to try to understand how the body is working. So now let's talk about physiological chains. So what we mean with physiological chains, we know that everything is connected. Okay, everything is connected, but not randomly. Things are connected in a very specific way. When you have two muscles that are one on top of the other, and that's because of the fascia, I will explain later, then one, when it's tight, can bring tensions to the next one, then to the next one, then to the next one, and they react in a chain. So a French lady started to talk about that. She was called Françoise Mézières, and she observed a back chain that was starting from the head all the way down along the back to the sole of the feet. And I know that in the States you have many other people who have also discovered these kind of things, like Thomas Myers, for example, has studied that a lot. So she started with that back chain, and he studied with this lady, and he thought, that's very smart, because that's right that you see that very often you have tensions in the lower back pain, in the lower back, and then after that you get the tensions up in the neck or down to the knee. So you see that there is some connection. But he thought, okay, maybe we have a back chain, but why would we have only one back chain? So he thought that if this is right, and he thought that this really made sense, then that means we must have other chains in the body. All the muscles should be part of a chain, and it should be able to do all the movements of the body. So by thinking in this way of physiological chains, it's a way to approach the body, to understand the biomechanic. And if you compare that to a computer, by example, you would say that the Busquet method is a way of having some computer coding. We try to understand how it's work in the body, how tensions make a change in the posture. So that's the way he was thinking his method. So when we talk about the chains, we have different types of chain, two types. We have the dynamic and the static chains. In the dynamic chains, then that's the muscles chains. And we have different ones, as you can see on the pictures. We have the flexor muscles chains. So every time we have one for the left side and one for the right side. So it will start from the head, going all the way down along the trunk, and then go in the back of the leg, and then in the front again. So that these chains make the movement of flexing the whole body. So if you contract the whole of it, you will end up in a fetal position. the flexion of the whole body, both sides. Then you have the extensor muscle chains. They are opposite to the flexor ones, and they make the extension of the whole body. Then you also have some cross chains. The open cross muscle chains makes the opening of the body. And you have the closed cross muscle chains that make the closing of the body. So one tension somewhere can go up, down, along the path of these chains. Then aside from that, we have the stability chains. They're made of connective tissue. And you have for that the muscular skeleton stability chain, and that's the one that's made of connective tissue, so the fascia, and the one where it's very tense and very dense in the back of the body. The one I was talking about, starting from the top of the head, going all the way down along the back until the sole of the feet. So this one is not made of muscle, but really made of this connective tissue, and it helps with your static. Then you have the neurovascular stability chain. So that's made of the nerves and vascular vessels, because they're also all connected at some way. And then you have the visceral stability chain. So that connects all the organs you have in the abdomen, and also the organs you have in the thorax area, and the organs you have in the skull, so the brain. All of that is connected through fascia and connective tissue. So if you have a tension somewhere, that can have an impact through this visceral chain. So I told you many people have discussed about a way of working of our body in chains. But what is specific from the Méthode Busquet is these different things. The first thing is that this approach in chains integrates the skull, because it makes sense that the chains don't stop here. They actually go all the way up to the skull and even inside the skull. And that's very interesting to understand that, because then tensions you would have in the skull can have an impact on your whole posture. And that's even more important to think with babies, by example. Because when giving birth, the baby goes through a very complicated way, and it can happen that the skull has some compression. And that's the reason why when a baby is born, it doesn't have only one bone. It has many different bones, so it can adjust all the way out. But sometimes the pressure that he will receive when being born will be so intense that he will carry on tensions later on. And when getting a child or even an adult, these tensions can still have an impact on the other chains and creates a bad posture and all different troubles. So that's very important to have this integration of the skull when we approach the whole body. Then we have also a consistency from head to toes. So what does that mean? It means that each muscle you have, each muscle chain will have in the anatomy a very clear sense. You have muscles that really connect one to another all the way from the head to the feet. You don't have a place where, oh, actually there is no muscle there. It's just connected magically. No, the anatomy is very clear about that. You can really have a continuity from head to toes that explains the anatomy of the chains. So that's a thing. And another thing is that all the muscles of the body take part in at least one muscle chain. So the body is a very, very beautiful machine when you think about it. It's all very, very smart. And then another thing that's specific from the method is that we will, in the practice, we will have first an analytical approach and then a global approach. Because we don't want immediately to work with global postures. That's something we will do, but we want to first release all the tensions separately. So we will try to point out all the tensions that we have, free them separately, and then we can approach the body in a more global way. And finally, it has developed some very specific treatments for the babies, different from the adults, because a baby is still very different, but they have created a very specific technique for them. So now let's approach the connective tissue, the fascia. So what is the fascia? So I said it's a connective tissue. So when you remove the skin, I'm not going to do that today to show you, but if you remove the skin, you will see something white that is covering the whole muscles. And that's what we call the fascia. So the fascia is something that's going to be a packing tissue, but not only. It's also stabilizing the body. It encloses, so it creates separations between different groups of muscles, between organs. It also supports the organs and the muscles and transmits the force globally, because you have different types of fascia. You have the superficial one, the one I said you would see when you remove the skin, and it's connecting everything in the body. Sorry for that. But you also have some deep fascia. That's the one you have, by example, that's around all the organs in your body. That makes connection between different organs and between organs and muscles or organs and bones. So that's the deep fascia. But you also have the muscle-related fascia. This one is, you can see on the picture on the right. This one is all around the fibers of your muscle. So it's not only surrounding the whole muscle itself, but it's also separating the muscle in different groups, and it's also around every single fiber of the muscle. It's the envelope that you have around it. So it's super, super important, because if you don't have it, then it's not going to be efficient when you have a contraction. So that brings the efficiency of the contraction of the muscle. And even the tendon is made of fascia. So it's super important. And another thing important is that the fascia is the greatest sensory organ of the body, which means we have all the receptors that will give you information for your different senses are located into the fascia. So you have receptors for the pressure, for the traction, so also receptors to make you feel the heating or the cold, or everything like that. Also, you have receptors for the proprioception. And what is proprioception? That's the sensation that you have, the awareness that you have of your body position. You have captors around the tendons that give you the information of how it's contracted and gives you the information of your body position. So if you close your eyes and someone take your hands, put it in a direction, you know where it is. Even if you don't see it, you know how you are positioned because of these receptors that you have, and that are also in the fascia. And the last thing that's really important is that the fascia is the most innervated tissue in the body, which means that you have many nerve endings inside the fascia, 6 to 10 times more than inside the muscle, and which means that if the fascia is tight, is contracted, it's going to compress these nerves, and it can create a lot of pain. So it's very important when you don't know that to pay attention to the fascia. And so these fascia explain why you have these connections between different muscles, because each muscle is surrounded by fascia. Then you have another fascia that goes from one muscle to another, and then another one. And we know that they are super sensitive. So then when one muscle is contracted, it brings a little of tensions inside the fascia that gives the information to the fascia of the next muscle. So it just all makes sense how these muscles react in chains thanks to the fascia. Now I want to talk about the container-content relationship. That's something really specific from the Busquet method, and that's super, super important. So I go through this. So and I'm going to explain that with the abdomen, because I think that's the easiest way to understand it. If you look at the abdomen, you have so many fascia in there. every organ is surrounded by a fascia, and then they connect different organs together. By example, you have some fascia that connect the great intestine to the gallbladder, just to give you an example. And that's super important because the great intestine is surrounded by muscles that help with the digestion. They contract all the time to make you digest. And the movements these muscles make, because you have fascia that connect it to the gallbladder, is going to make the gallbladder move. And the gallbladder needs that movement to function. So the fascia has a very, very important role to play inside the abdomen. And so if you have one organ in the abdomen that is suffering, you have some inflammation in there. The inflammation is going to make the fascia tight. So then it's going to bring tightness to the next organ, and etc. And as the fascia is also attached to the muscles, the information of tightness is going to go also to your muscles. So the tensions that we have inside are going to have an impact outside. So when I said the container-content relationships, when I say content, that's the inside, the viscers. So the inside, the content, is going to have an impact on the outside, the container, that are the muscle chains. And we have two ways to react to that. So if we go down to the minus here, that's the example I was giving you if you have inflammation. You have inflammation somewhere, then the body is super smart. I told you that already. Body is smart. It's going to always react with priorities. So organs in your abdomen are a priority. You need them if they are super important. They are more important than the muscles you have, than your posture. So the body is going to react to protect these organs inside the abdomen. And for that, if you have inflammation, or also if you have scar tissue, if you had a surgery, by example, then we don't want to stretch this tissue that's suffering. Because if you pull on some inflammation, you're going to just make it worse. So the body, being smart, is going to react to cocoon the area, to protect. So if you have inflammation there, it's going to activate the chains that are going to close the area. So it's very interesting that at some point, when you have the inflammation, it is protecting the organ. So that's a good thing at that moment. But the problem is that afterwards, when you don't have the inflammation anymore, these tensions are not very useful anymore. So you may manage to release some of them with the time, but sometimes it happens that these tensions are still there and create a change in your posture that can still be there 30 years later or even longer, and that can even be worse because of the compensations afterwards. So that's a way to react to the changes in the abdomen. And the other way to react to that, if we look at the upper side of this, is the opposite situation. So instead of having pain and inflammation, we have some organs that are growing. By example, I've been drinking too much, and my liver is in a very bad shape and is growing there. In that case, you don't want to cocoon the area, definitely not. You don't want to compress the liver. So the body is going to do just the opposite way. It's going to open to create space for the liver. So it's just two different opposite ways of reacting. And if you can see here, then the body is going to change the posture to that. And you see that when you need space, and we need space when we're pregnant, then the body is going to have a visceral expansion, so opening the space. So it makes a rotation of your pelvic area as well. It opens it, open your rib cage to create space. And in the opposite case, when you have the inflammation and the pain, it's going to try to cocoon the area. So it's going to make a backwards twist of the pelvic area, and it's going to close the ribs, to cocoon the organ that's suffering. And that's what is saying then. We just want to decrease all the different diameters of the abdomen to protect the organ. But also, something very important to say about it is that here I give you a simple example. If you have pain here in the abdomen, you will close the area. And by the way, when you look at me like that, do I not look like someone who has some pain in the abdomen? Yeah, that's the way we usually will react when we have pain in the abdomen. We don't want to stretch the inflamed tissue. But that also means that if the organ that's suffering is not exactly centered, but a bit on the side, by example, I have my appendix that has some chronic inflammation, and that actually really happened to me. Then the inflammation is on the side. Then the body is going to react to cocoon very specifically this organ. And what's going to happen then is it's going to create a scoliosis. So that's a very important way to understand scoliosis. And Léopold Busquet, in all his practice, pay a lot of attention to the scoliosis. And from the experience that he had, he showed that 8 scoliosis out of 10 are due to tensions in the abdomen at some time of the life of the person. So that's really important when you know that, because then you're not going to react the same way to re-educate. You're not going to just ask the person to strengthen and try to do different things. The first thing we would want to do is then to release the tensions in the fascia inside the abdomen. Once that will be done, then we can think to release the rest of the body. But that's the origin of the problem, so that makes complete sense to have a different approach now that we know that. So now let's talk about how is the practice of this method. So I will always start with a Busquet checkup, which means that I will ask you lots of questions about your medical history. This makes sense now that we know the impact of something that you had a long time ago can still have today on your posture and then on the pain that you have. So we will try to understand what has happened through your life, and I will also observe your posture to see how your body is reacting. So there will be the questions about the medical history, and then we will observe the posture, the static posture, but also the dynamic posture, how you can move, how the tensions in your chains are maybe disturbing some movements. And from that, I make a synthesis trying to understand what's the cause of the trouble that you have and why you're coming to see me. And from that, we can create a treatment plan. And we will use some manual treatments to try to release different tensions that you have. So we have different techniques to do that. The first one is going to be the loosening postures. We want to work to release the tensions in the muscles and in the fascia through some slow and gentle stretching. So it's going to be some specific posture for the different areas of the body, but also some global posture to release the whole path of the chain. Aside from that, we also have some techniques and postures to direct the position. And it's going to be, by example, it can happen that we have a pelvic twisted from tensions we had in the past, or sometimes just by falling or an accident that can make the pelvic twisted, and then that has an impact on the whole body. So we have some techniques to try to adjust and realign the pelvic, by example. We can also do some dynamization techniques, and especially for the breathing. Try to release all the tensions in the diaphragm. That is a very, very important muscle for your body and for your blood circulation, and also has a very important impact in the posture. Then there are also some proprioceptive techniques that we can use. Because I told you the proprioception is your own awareness of your body position. So when you've been in a wrong position for 60 years, your body is used to that. So then we want to correct it. Now we have a new position, and we want your body to be aware that this new position is the correct position. So that's something also important to work on, and to be aware of your balance, and make sure that this can help in your daily life and when you're walking. We have also visceral techniques, and these ones are super important when we see that so many impacting the posture are due to visceral tensions. So these techniques that we will use for the viscers are here not to try to move the viscers or to make it work better. No, they're here to release the tensions in the fascia inside the abdomen, to make sure that everything goes back to a right, relaxed position and doesn't impact the muscle chains. So that's the techniques, and they are not the most enjoyable, I have to tell you. That can be sometimes a bit uncomfortable, but they are very helpful. And finally, we have the cranial techniques to work on all the tensions inside and outside the skull. We have, by example, with the Busquet method, we have learned 54 different techniques just for the skull to work on all the tensions we can have there. And it is very important, if we realize that we have tensions here, to work on it in a global approach. So now I just want to show you a clinical case. A man who came to see me, that was a few years ago in 2015, Mr. G. He was 57 years old, type 2 diabetic. He had no history of injury or surgery. And I gave him 9 sessions of 50 minutes, and we did that once a week. So the reasons why he came to see me is that he had a herniated disc in L4, L5 that was compressing the sciatic nerve on the left side. And added to that, they also saw in the MRI that he had degenerative disc from L2 to S1. And from that, he had a very intense pain in his left side. He said sharp like a stab in the lower back and going to the glutes, and also some tingling sensation from the back of the knee all the way down to the foot. So he was very, very annoyed with these symptoms because he was a very active man. His job was also something very active. So from that, he couldn't do anything anymore. And he had been to see the surgeon, who said, I can't do anything for you. Because he said the herniated disc was too bad and the location was too dangerous, so he wouldn't take any risk to operate. So he was just there with his pain, and he didn't see any issues, and he came to see me. So we did the physical examination, and that's how it looks like when I observe, and the notes that I take. I observe the static posture, and I also test all the different groups of chains, and from that I know all the tensions that you have. I also observe the static of the pelvic when it's needed, and the visceral and the crane. Now let's see what's happened with him. So on the left you see how he was the first time he came to see me, and on the right you can see how he was after 7 sessions. So you can see that he was tilted towards his right side. He's a bit, I'm going to exaggerate because it might not be so easy to see when you look at the picture, but he is a bit like that. Then when we look on another position, you can see that he had a hunch back in the upper back, and the lower back is actually a bit curved, making his tummy going out and look like he has a big belly, which is not necessarily true. And he had his head also forward. And you can even see that the hand was also a bit forward. So the tensions were going all the way down his arms as well. And you can tell that after 7 sessions, it is much better. You see a much better alignment. You can see he looks even thinner when you look at it because he's not moving his tummy forwards anymore. The back is more straight, and there's still something we could work on a little bit. That's this head. The line, the yellow line, you should have the ankle there. Oh, sorry. The ankle should be along the line. You should have the hip as well. You should have the shoulder, and you should have the tragus of the ear also in the same line. So that's the only thing that we see here. It's still a bit bad for him. And now that's a dynamic examination that we do. So I ask him to go forwards. And what I want to observe here is if he has a harmonious curve in the back. That's really what I want to see. Because if we have a harmonious curve, that means we don't have tensions in the muscles of this chain. They allow the body to go forward. But then if I have some area where it's flat, that means the muscle tensions don't allow the back to curve. So that means we have tensions in that area. So here we can see the first time he came to me, the curve is definitely not harmonious. We have a very large flat area in the lower back, and again a flat area in the neck. And you see that after session, the curve is much more harmonious. Now, on the other side, we want to test now the chains in the front of the body. And here again, we would like to have a harmonious curve going backward. And you see that the first session was really, really bad because it doesn't have a curve going backward. It actually has a curve going forwards. So the tensions in the front are so intense that they really don't allow him to go backwards. That's something we really had to work on. And you see that after the 7 sessions, that's much more easy for him to go backwards. Now we observe when he goes on the side. And here again, we want to have a harmonious curve. It's always the same. If we have a flat area, it means we have tensions. And you can see that the lower back doesn't allow the movement. It's all flat. And that's the same on the other side. All flat in the lower back. It doesn't want to move. And after 7 sessions, it is much better as well. So here I'm showing you with this patient I had that working with the Busquet method allowed him to have a much better posture, but it had also a very huge impact on his symptoms because actually after 4 sessions, he didn't have any more tingling in the lower leg, which is a very important thing because the tingling is a symptom that is showing us that the nerve is really compressed. And that's the first step. But after that, that will evolve in losing the mobility. So that's very interesting to see that after 4 sessions, we didn't have any more this tingling. And after 6 sessions, he didn't have any more pain, or just a little bit, but he could walk and do things again. So we saw each other's 9 sessions, and I never saw him anymore. He seems to be fine. So I hope he is still. I think he was really good with doing the postures I asked him to do at home, and I think he kept on doing them to try to prevent from having these tensions again. So now that we see this clinical case, we can talk a bit more about the interest of the Busquet method in the back pain. So if we talk about the herniated disc, which was the issue my patient had when he came to see me, I like then to compare the body to a tent. That's a weird thing to do, I know, but you're going to understand. So let's say that you see the central pillar of the tent. We're going to compare that to our spine. So now you see that this central pillar of the tent is attached to the ground through 2 ropes, one on each side. And now let's say this rope that's attaching to the central pillar for our body, these ropes are the chains we have in the front and the chains we have in the back. So now, when we look at the tent, if you pull on one of the ropes, what's going to happen? Exactly. It's going to bend on one side. And it's the same with our muscles tensions. If I have tensions in the front, I'm going to have a hunchback. If I have tensions in the back, I'm going to have a lower back very curved. So that's the same idea as the ropes of the tent. But what happens then if I pull on both sides at the same time? That's going to make the central pillar going to be pushed down, and that's the same with the spine. It's going to be all compressed. So that has a huge impact, because if the spine is compressed, that's going to push at some point maybe one disc out of the space it should be, and you're going to have a herniated disc. So when we understand that, then you understand that it's important then to release the tensions in these two ropes. So in the chains in the front and in the chains in the back. And that's exactly what happened to my patient who came to see me. When we did the examinations, we saw that he had tensions in the front because he couldn't go backward. He was still like that, so tensions in the front. But he also had tensions in the back. So these two groups of tensions made the spine very compressed. So by releasing tensions in the front and in the back, we allow the spine to be less compressed, and it can even allow the disc to go back to its right position. Now I'm going to discuss about the interest in the case of osteoarthritis. So what is osteoarthritis? Osteoarthritis is what happens when you have some friction in a joint. You have some friction, two bones. Normally you have a space in between two bones in a joint. But if you don't have space anymore, then the two bones touch each other, make some friction, and are going to damage the cartilage. So the cartilage is the layer that you have around the bone at the joint where two bones connect together. That's the layer that is protecting the bone. So you don't feel the cartilage. Cartilage doesn't have any nerve. So it doesn't provide any pain neither. But when you have frictions again and again, that removes the cartilage, then if you have still this compression, you have a contact to the bone where you have nerves, and that's painful. So the strategy that we will have is to try to reduce the compression in the joint in the same way that we did for the back with our tent. If we manage to release the tensions, then we have less compression in the joints, and therefore they won't touch each other, so you won't have this friction that will be painful on the nerves. That's one thing, and also that will avoid to make it worse. Because when you start having osteoarthritis, if it's still compressed, then every time you move, you have a friction, and that just removes even more and more and more cartilage. So having an approach with the Busquet method is going to be a way to prevent, to make the osteoarthritis worse, and maybe to reduce the pain from it if we manage to open the space in the joint. So that's how we try to deal with the osteoarthritis. All right, and you see that we don't have so much things to talk anymore anyway. So I'm going to the conclusion now. So if you have noticed, the Busquet method is a very holistic approach to the body. So we really try to understand through the medical history and through the information the body gives through the posture and different testing. We try to understand how the posture has gone bad, but also how you got to some pain in the body, and try to then create a treatment plan to release these tensions and hopefully make you feel better in the body. So it's interesting for all different types of people and different ages. It's good for children to prevent having issues that they would maybe have later, but it's also good for adults who already have the tensions to try to help to release, and also old people to prevent and reduce the osteoarthritis, and also sportive people, athletes, to improve the efficiency of the movement. So it's a technique for many people. So thank you everybody for joining me today, and I hope that it made it clear for you. Yeah, you can do that by the spa. So if I will say that for everybody. You can always come to see me just to discuss if a treatment would be interesting for you. You don't have to necessarily book a treatment immediately if you're not sure that's something for you. So I can always give free consultations at any time. You can come by the reception and book for it.